Hey, this is Bill from Calderwood Percussion, and this is the Hamilton Rope Tension Field Snare. We completely custom designed and built these instruments to reference the sound of Revolutionary War era drums while having the modern modifications necessary to be used as part of a drum set in a Broadway pit. We built one of these instruments for each of the productions of Hamilton plus the cast recording, which means that there are only 6 of these in the world, and we'd like to show you how we make them. This is 16-inch 6-ply Keller shell stock that we're cutting down to 15 inches deep for the shell. And we're going to add 1 5/8" deep re-rings cut from the same stock. So now that we've done a super rough level sanding on these re-rings on the belt sander, we're ready to fit them into the drum. Now, the level sanding on this can be pretty rough because we're still going to cut off the excess from the shell on the table saw later. So it doesn't really matter if they're perfectly flat. So now we're going to move on to fitting them, which means we're going to cut sections of these rings out on the bandsaw, use this oscillating belt sander to get a nice tight fit, and we'll glue them into the drum shell. So what makes layout on the Hamilton rope tension drum different from conventional drums or other rope tension drums that we make is that unlike most rope tension drums that would be a marching instrument played on a strap, this is part of a drum set. So it's going to need floor tom legs so that it can be placed where he can play it, and modern snare hardware so he can turn off the snares if he needs to. And when we put those things on the show, we have to make sure that we keep those out of the way of the ropes, both when the ropes are under tension and when they're not. So it's a little bit more complicated layout than a conventional rope drum or conventional drum set tom.
Those are good over.
So for the hoops on this rope tension drum, we use this 12-ply shell stock. But 12 plies is not quite thick enough for the hoops to really register correctly on the heads. So we add 2 more plies to the inside of the hoop to get them just a little bit thicker so that the heads will seat properly. Both lamination strips are cut and fit to the hoops. We need to glue them in. We're gluing them into the inside, which makes clamping a little bit tricky. Took us a little while to figure out the best way to do that, and what we settled on is yoga balls. Here we go. So right now we're going to do layout on the hoops for the rope tension drum. So we mark those with our layout mat. These hoops are dramatically shorter than what we would normally put on a rope tension drum to give the hoops a much lower profile. We do that because when you're playing at a drum set, which is how this drum will be used, having really tall hoops on only one drum is really difficult to play because it changes the necessary stick angle. So we use low profile hoops, and we're going to mark them up here for drilling. So when drilling the holes for the rope to pass through on these hoops, we use this really simple jig. It holds the hoop at a 50-degree angle and we can drill right through. 50 degrees is kind of an arbitrary thing after some experimentation. I just decided that's what we thought worked the best. So that's what we do. So the next thing we need to do with these hoops is cut what are called snare gates. Snare gates are little notches cut out in the hoop for the snares to pass through. In order to make those slots nice and flat and even, we made this jig so the hoop can rest in it and move around to cut the slot. Now the only downside to this jig, we've got a stop block here that restricts how far, and that's how we make sure that the slot stays nice and even. But the only downside is we're pulling into the blade, which isn't very safe. It sends a lot of material up at your face because it's plywood especially. So that's why we have a full face shield. These 4-tom leg brackets are what we're going to use on the snare drum, but they don't provide quite enough clearance for the legs to pass by the hoops and the rope, so we're going to need to make spacers for them. We're going to use this scrap of 8-ply shell stock because it's already radius and it'll match the shell nicely.
Black is black. It's like, how much more black could it be? None more black.
Every drum that we make has a custom laser engraved badge with the client's name and serial number, but for some clients we'll do more interesting custom marquetry with a logo or a band name or something. So for the Hamilton drums, we do the Alexander Hamilton on the star logo with some customized tag for where the show is going to be performed. So when we make leather ears for rope tension drums, we start with just a plain piece of saddle skirting leather. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick, give or take. We cut it into strips on the bandsaw, and then we use this acrylic shape template that we laser cut to draw onto the leather the shape that we're going to need to cut for the ears. We cut them out on a scroll saw and finish the edges on an oscillating belt sander. After that, we dye them, we wax them, and then we can lace them up and glue them and they'll be ready to put on the drum. Just like with the extra badges and marquetry, we add a little bit of extra swag by laser engraving the Alexander Hamilton logo with the star onto each of the leather ears. In order to tune a rope tension drum, you need to pull quite a lot of tension into these ropes. That can be kind of difficult to do while maintaining even tension all the way around the drum and keeping the heads parallel. That's even more difficult when you have Kevlar batter head, which we do on this drum. So this hydraulic press acts as a clamp. It just clamps the drum together to keep the heads parallel, and it makes it much, much easier to get consistent tuning all the way around the drum. You still have to pull all the tension into the rope, but this just helps you to do it in a consistent way. Now, because it's a hydraulic jack with a 20-ton jack here, it's very easy to kind of overdo it. You can stretch heads, break heads, or even break hoops if you're not careful. So having a drum dial on the top head makes it a lot easier and safer, so that way I know how much tension I've got in the head, I know I'm not going to break heads or hoops, and I can get good repeatable results if I have to tune multiple drums to the same pitch. So we're going to use natural gut snares. Although it's commonly called cat gut, it is not actually made of cats. It is made of sheep and goat intestines, but it feels similar to rawhide and you need to get it wet to make it pliable. But in addition to that, when this comes from the manufacturer, it's coated with a shellac that we need to remove in order to be able to make the guts pliable enough to use them on the drum. So we're going to use acetone to do that. Once all the shellac has been removed, we'll put it into warm water to get the guts pliable enough for us to be able to put them on the drum. So the excess rope is generally left on the drum. This is called a drag rope because with most rope tension drums that are for marching, the rope hangs down below the drum. While you're marching, it doesn't really drag on the ground, but it's called a drag rope. For the sake of this being played in a drum set, we're actually going to run this drag rope back through the ropes on the front of the drum to keep it up and out of the way. So anytime you hear a military sounding snare drum in the music of Hamilton, now you know where it's from. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. We're big fans of the show Hamilton and totally honored to be part of making that show come to life. If you've ever seen the show, let us know what you think of the drums in the comments below. We're really excited to ship this off to London, and hey, maybe someday we'll get to go over there and see the show. Thanks, we'll see you next time.
It's getting dyed this color, right?
Huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, until the snares dry. Sound like garbage, but it plays itself.
Sounds awful. Redo it.